joined today with Professor Iain Mattaj, Director General of the European Molecular Biology Laboratory, EMBL. EMBL was established more than 40 years ago, and it is one of the longest standing research infrastructures in Europe. Iain has 12 years of leading EMBL, and today we are going to explore the organisational challenges of leading an established research infrastructure. So Iain, could you describe the special features of EMBL in terms of being a research infrastructure?
Yeah, I think there are several. So EMBL is an intergovernmental organization, and so the governance structure, which we'll discuss later, is an unusual one. EMBL has a number of missions, of which providing access to research infrastructures to the scientific communities of the member countries is one. Others are basic research, advanced training in molecular life sciences, technology development and technology transfer, as well as the integration of life science activities in Europe together with many other organizations. So these challenges make EMBL an unusual infrastructure. The perhaps most unique feature of EMBL is, however, that we have a fixed term contract system. So 90% of our staff can stay for a maximum period of 9 years, and so we have a continuous turnover among our staff members. And this, of course, brings with it a special challenge. It's an advantage in some ways because, of course, we always have people with new ideas, new expertise. But obviously, we also lose expertise and experience because of this system.
Mm. And could you also go into describe kind of the voting rights and kind of more the legal structure?
So the laboratory is governed by its member states. There are currently 23 European full member states and 2 associate non-European member states. The 23 full member states each have 1 vote, so the decisions are taken on the basis of 1 member state, 1 vote. And for most decisions, either a simple majority or a 2/3 majority is the majority which is required. There are certain special decisions, and those are taken with regard to our 5-year programs of activity, and also the accompanying indicative budget, which goes with these programs, which have to be taken unanimously by the member states. So there are different majorities required for different sorts of decisions, but most are 2/3 or simple majority.
So within the life science community, EMBL has a really strong reputation. It could be described as a jewel in the European research community. I'm sure that brings with it a number of challenges to maintain that reputation. Could you explain kind of what those challenges are in terms of its organisation?
Yeah, so I think probably within the science community, EMBL is best known for its research activity. And I think to maintain research excellence, several things are required. Probably the most important and the most difficult to achieve is a culture of attaining excellence. I think if you bring new people into a group of people who are used to demanding excellent performance, it's easier for them to get used to the expectation. But there are also less difficult to define parameters than culture. So one of the things which is essential is that there are various metrics which are used to measure performance. We use those at EMBL not only to measure research performance, but also to measure the performance of our service activities and our service units. So the most important of those is that there is an external advisory committee which is appointed by the member state council. So these are people who are all external to EMBL. They're appointed ad personam. They're not representatives of specific countries. Some of them are European, some come from other continents. So there are Americans, Japanese, etc., who are members of this body. Those people come to EMBL, and they also appoint ad hoc experts who review all of our activities. So they go into a great deal of detail and provide the most reliable evaluation of our activities. These evaluations are for the member states. They're presented to the member states, usually by the chair of the committee, which carried out the evaluation. But we have other simpler metrics which we use. So for example, it's very important to know in relation to the infrastructure aspects, how many users are there? Are the users happy with the services they receive?
So these are the way you're measuring?
Yes, those are the ways we measure output and user satisfaction. And again, that's different for different infrastructures that we provide and has to be different.
Could you maybe elaborate on these kind of performance measures
Yes.
that are used?
Yeah, so essentially we provide facilities which are, if you like, where people have to come to the infrastructure to use it. So these are usually based around big machines with expert staff who know how to use the machines, who know how to deal with users, and who know how to help users to get the best from the machines. For example, the structural biology facilities which we run in Hamburg and in Grenoble, those are based on sites which produce synchrotron radiation, either the German synchrotron or the European synchrotron radiation facility. And there we count the number of users, we ask them, we survey them, we ask them how satisfied they are with the user experience, we ask them what they need, we ask them what's missing from our offer, and we talk to them when they come and after they've gone. Our data resources have to be dealt with very differently because they're used virtually, they are web-based services. Occasionally people come, or actually many people come, but only a tiny proportion of the users come to do courses to learn how to use the data resources better. But we have to survey the users of the data resources regularly to make sure that they're easy to use, that the users can find what they need, that there are not things which we don't provide, which we could provide as part of the service. We also provide tools to make use of the data which is held in the data resources. And again, those are subject to user experience reviews. So we do questionnaires, virtual questionnaires, web-based questionnaires to ask people, are they satisfied? Do they get what they need from our site, or are there things that we could improve?
And you've talked before earlier that the other missions of EMBL, as well as service provision, is the scientific output and the scientific excellence. What kind of performance measures on that side do you use?
Yes, again, the most important performance measure are the in-depth reviews, which are carried out under the control and with people chosen by our scientific advisory committee. So those, again, go into a great deal of detail and a great deal of depth in assessing the performance of people. But there, of course, we also have to have simpler measures to help us to be able to compare more easily with national research institutions. And so there, what our member states wish is that we also provide them with information, so bibliometric information, impact factor information, again, quantitative information on how much we do, how much training we do, how many courses we run, how many conferences we organize, and so on. So it's a mix of bibliometric information. I should say that EMBL always does extremely well in such measures. We're usually one of the top 10 institutes in all areas of research in the world when bibliometric analysis is done. But there are also many other things that we do. Our training programs are evaluated by external evaluators. We run many courses and conferences. There are about 7,000 people who come to EMBL every year to do courses and conference training, workshops, etc. We run workshops together with industry in some areas. And those things all have to be measured. The quality of those has to be measured. And that's all part of the evaluation of what we do.
So one term that probably a lot of people have in their mind, might be asking a question, is you haven't touched on a classical kind of return on investment kind of figure.
Yeah.
Could you explain kind of?
Yes, the return on investment. So perhaps I can start from a bit further away before I come to that question in relation to EMBL. So research infrastructure organizations and intergovernmental organizations are measured in very different ways in relation to return on investment. So there is a method which is used in some such organizations, which is called juste retour, which means that countries should get back financially what they have put into the organization. That's not the way that EMBL is measured. So EMBL is encouraged by its member states to go for excellence in all of its activities. And what the member states want is to have access to excellent resources, excellent infrastructures, to excellent training programs, and also, of course, people from all of the member states can come to work at EMBL for 9 years. And so it also is a place which trains many people, both in science and actually in administration, who are at EMBL for 9 years and then go back into their national system. And that's one of the outputs of EMBL, which the member states are particularly happy about. But it's really about having a true center of excellence in the areas in which we're active that all of the member states can make use of and all of their science communities can make use of.
So it's that scientific excellence that you come back to each time.
Yes.
Yeah. Now there are obviously a lot of different types of users, user community. Could you briefly outline what different users you have across the EMBL?
So there are people who make use of EMBL by coming to a conference or doing a course, doing some training. There are people who visit EMBL either to collaborate with research groups or actually also very commonly to collaborate with the facilities that we run. So either the large-scale user facilities or the smaller-scale core facilities which help scientists to do particular technical things. Like microscopy facilities, electron microscopy facilities, genomics facilities. And people often come both to make use of those, but also actually to learn how to set them up, how to run them, how to make them work efficiently, what's the best equipment, which is the most robust equipment if I want to set up a facility to do microscopy or to do genomic work in my own home institute. And so people come often for several months to train in these facilities and to learn in detail how they work.
And the life sciences, it doesn't stand still. So for an organisation like EMBL, you obviously got to keep it up to date. And it sounds like it's the scientific, the user community that would do that. So how does that user community, the research community, actually inform the direction of EMBL?
So again, as I said, this happens in different ways for the different infrastructures that we run. So for the physical infrastructures which people visit, the users are constantly discussing what could be done better during their visits. They're also surveyed after they visited to find out what was missing, what would you have liked to have had access to but couldn't have access to. In relation to the data resources, this is also an ongoing issue. Here, the problem, if you like, with user requests and user requirements is that there is almost an infinite space for people to work with the data that we hold. So obviously the data we hold is all from the biomedical science area, but the users are incredibly diverse. So 20% or so of the users come from industry. Users come from medicine, they come from agriculture, they come from all sorts of academia, and they all need and want different things, and they all need and have different backgrounds in how to use the data which is provided. And so we need to be able to allow users who are expert to very quickly get what they need, and usually they download large amounts of data and go off to work with it at their home institution. Non-expert users also have to be able to find what they need. So there we need to have very well-designed web resources such that it's easy to find things. The gold standard in this area is that people are used to doing Google searches. And so when they come to the EMBL web pages, they want to be able to type in a few words that sort of describe what they want, and then very quickly get to exactly what they want in as few steps as possible. So those are the ways we interact with the users. And then once we know who the users are, and for the data resources, there are several million users every year, so there's a very large number, then we can survey them. We can send to the addresses we have web-based questionnaires to ask about their experience, what were the things they found difficult, which things did they find difficulty in finding, how could the website be designed in order to make it more user-friendly, are there tools which should be there that aren't there, and we try to keep up with their requests in this way.
So it's all the time referring back to your user community and allowing them to say what.
And allowing them to say what the needs are. Of course, as I mentioned, there are limits. We have limited funding, we have limited personnel capacity, and so not every wish can be granted, but of course, many of the wishes are expressed by many users, and therefore we can see which are the things which really are most important to do better and to fix.
And so none of this would happen at all without the funders. EMBL's been established 40 years. Obviously you have to keep the funders committed.
Yes. Yeah.
How do you go about doing that?
I think one of the major ways is to try to be transparent about what we do and to try to keep our funders. So our funders are, in the first place, our member states. But we also have many other sources of funding. So we receive funding from many research funding organizations, research councils, foundations. We actually receive a significant amount of funding also from industry. We carry out programs together with industry, which I'll talk about later. So there are many, many different funders who we have to inform. And I think the major thing is to inform the funders what we are doing, what we want to do, what we've done with the funding that they've provided, what our plans are. The funders obviously also have a role in deciding which plans we can fulfill and which plans we cannot. So particularly with the member states, every 5 years we have a long conversation with the member states, which stretches over a period of about 2 years, to determine what will be the program of activities over the next 5 years. And part of this conversation is to report on what happened. What did we say we were going to do 5 years ago, and which parts of this have we done? And if there are things they wanted which we haven't done, why haven't those been done? Did something change in the research area, or was there some other reason why this wasn't done?
And what would be your kind of primary message to share with other leaders of research infrastructures about negotiating with funders?
So again, I think the main thing is to be very clear about what it is that you want to do, why it is that you think they should want to fund you to do this? What is the value to this particular funder in funding EMBL to do something, rather than in funding some other organization to do it? And really never promising something that you don't want to deliver or that you can't deliver. Always being realistic about what the goals are of the funding that you will receive, hopefully, from them. Never over-promising, which is often a problem, particularly in research, to over-promise what can be delivered, but really to try to be honest and to be realistic about what can be achieved, and then to demonstrate the quality of what has been done with past funding from that funder, to build a relation of trust with funders, so that they have the belief that if they fund us, if they find something interesting that they want to fund with us, that they will have a product which they can be proud of as well as we can be proud of.
So EMBL is, you could describe it as a distributed research infrastructure, and it also has kind of different focus each site. That's quite different from, say, single-sited research infrastructure. What are then the different challenges for getting the funding or the ongoing funding in that situation?
So I think that this is really not so much a challenge for funding unless it looks from the outside as if there is more than one site which is doing the same thing. Obviously, funders never want to duplicate activities. And so we have this situation, for example, in Hamburg and Grenoble. Both are at sites of synchrotron radiation. Both do research using structural biology methods, using this synchrotron radiation, and both provide access to users of synchrotron radiation from the life science community. So why is that necessary, and what are the arguments that one can use with funders to persuade them that it's necessary? Here it's the user numbers which are decisive. So one can easily demonstrate that the amount of time which is available for users is completely occupied at both sites. It's possible to do user surveys. We know that we could serve more users if more time was available. Projects have to be selected from among those which are submitted. So this information helps to reassure funders that this is not an unnecessary duplication, but it's a necessary provision of user facilities at more than one site.
And think again about kind of a single site to multiple site, or maybe like a single project, as opposed to different projects. Again, how do funders actually approach their decisions?
So as I said, we have multiple different kinds of funders, and so some of the funders from whom we receive funding fund individual projects or individual parts of EMBL only. And there the problem doesn't arise. For funders who fund multiple parts of EMBL, again, it's about information and about demonstrating that all of the different things, all of the different activities are being carried out at a very high quality level, demonstrating that this is not being added on because we like to do it, but it's being added on because it's actually useful for the entire organization and for the member countries. So it's more about communication, and I think obviously communication is key to persuading people that the funding that they give is well spent and that the return that they get is what they expected, or maybe even sometimes exceeds what they expected.
So communication is coming out as a key theme. So Iain, you started as a biochemistry PhD student, and you forged a career in research of RNA and protein transport. And here you are as Director General of EMBL. What have you learned in the transition between or across your different careers?
Yeah. So I think perhaps the most important thing in organizing anything that involves human beings is learning how to deal with other people. So obviously at all levels of organization you have to be able to deal with people if you want to organize and run something successfully. So I would say the period of my life at which I had the most intense exposure to this and the most intense requirement to learn about this was when I started to run my own research group. Because I started the research group with a group of 5 young people who were completely different from each other in character, in ambition, in career choice, in their wish, why they were doing what they were doing. And I had to learn to realize that not everyone who was in research had the same motivations that I did. My motivation as a researcher was obviously primarily researchers want to find things out. But in my case, it was very clear to me once I had started my PhD, and certainly by the time I became a postdoctoral fellow, that I wanted a research career. And I was prepared to work extremely hard, and I was very dedicated and very committed and very focused on research. And that's true for most young research group leaders. It's not true for many PhD students. It's not true for many people who come to be technical assistants in laboratories. And one has to learn how to be able to deal with this difference in motivation while still motivating these people to help the overall goal of the laboratory in terms of its research and in terms of its achievements. And I think that in small is exactly the same thing which is required as one becomes in charge of a department or an institution or a whole organization. There are other things which you have to learn to go along with that. I think one of the most important things to learn at a relatively early stage is delegation. It's very important to be prepared to delegate things to people. It's very important to be able to be prepared to give people independence, including the independence to make their mistakes, because you learn by making mistakes. And it's very frustrating if you have a small research group and you know that you could do this better, or you could tell someone how to do it better, to let them make the mistakes, because that's the way they'll learn. If you tell them how to do it better, they will have forgotten that in 20 minutes and they won't have learned anything. And so that aspect of delegation becomes, of course, more and more important as you move up through the levels of running organizations. But it's, again, fundamental. You have to learn who to choose, who to trust, how far you can trust them, how much control you have to put in place. If you have to put controls in place, how to put these in place without disturbing the people, without giving them the feeling that they don't have independence, and so on. And I think it's these personal lessons which are general, independent of the level of organizational capacity is expected of you.
And kind of following on from this, you're due to retire at the end of 2018.
Yes.
Do you have some advice for your successor, Edith Hurd?
I do have advice, lots of it. I think one of the, as I said, one of the things you have to be prepared to do is to trust people. So Edith I know reasonably well. I know her as a researcher. I know that she has run an extremely good department in the Institut Curie. She has mentored young researchers, young group leaders there extremely well. So I think she comes with many of the capacities which are needed to be a successful director. I will be giving her advice on how to deal with the governance of EMBL, how to deal with the many funders, how to start to run a large administration, something which she doesn't have experience of. And many of these things I hope I can transmit some helpful advice on how to do it without trying to, without trying to advise on everything and every little detail, and trying to be behind Edith without being in front of her.
And we've covered a lot of topics today. Would you mind just kind of summing up the kind of key learning points?
Yeah, so I think the key learning points is that EMBL is a complex organization. It runs infrastructures, it carries out basic research, it has many advanced training programs, both for internal EMBL staff and for external visitors to the laboratory who come for training. It carries out technology development, it's actively engaged in technology transfer. It works together with funders, it works together with industry, and it works together with the European Commission and with our member states to integrate activities in the life sciences. So I think one major lesson is that if you're going to run a complex organization, you have to be very clear about what your organization wants to do. You have to clearly define your goals. You have to agree your goals with the organizations or the funders who fund you. You have to be very transparent with them about what are the things you can do and that you can't do. You have to discuss with them the outcomes of previous rounds of funding. And within the organization, you have to develop a collaborative, collegial spirit. People have to be happy to be at work at EMBL. They have to be happy to work together. And they need to have the feeling that they have the trust and the faith of management such that they can give their best in an independent way when they're running other parts and smaller parts of EMBL.
And I guess, and the undercurrent of this as well is always the scientific excellence as well.
Yeah. And I think, yes, if you're running a research organization, of course, there is only one standard for research achievement, and that's the world standard. And world-class research infrastructure, as any European intergovernmental organization should be, has to measure itself against the best in the world. And that's what you have to be prepared to do, and you have to set up mechanisms by which you can do this.
Thank you very much, Iain.
Thank you.